What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Timeout with Caveman and Dr. Fantasy. I'm Dr. Fantasy, as always, here with the Fantasy Caveman. This is episode number 5 of the 2023-24 season. We have a lot of news to go through today. In sessions, we were worried we weren't going to have a lot to talk about some weeks, and this is not one of those weeks.
Yeah, there is a lot to talk about. It's always a good thing when things happen. So, excited to get into it.
All right, so let's start off then with a trade similar to last week. Another fairly big one with not a star player. I don't even know how to qualify him, but Terry Rozier going to the Miami Heat. From the Hornets. The Heat traded Kyle Lowry and a 2027 lottery pick that is protected. If it is protected in 2027, it's an unprotected pick in 2028. So I don't even know where I'm going to be in 2028 by the time that this pick potentially comes into play. So, K-Man, what are your thoughts on this? Who do you think won this? Do you like this deal?
I wasn't aware of how solid of a season Terry Rozier is having this season. He's averaging 23 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, a steal, shooting 46% from the field, 36% from 3. So, no offense to Kyle Lowry, but at this stage in his career, Terry Rozier is a significant upgrade.
How dare you?
To what Kyle Lowry has been able to provide. He's a far cry from the Toronto days. I think those are behind him. But I don't think the price is that bad. Like you said, you're talking about a pick that's in 2027 or 2028. I don't even know. Like I said, I don't know what I'm even, who knows what the world's going to look like in 2027 or 2028, So the price is fine. I think we mentioned this briefly when we talked in the beginning of the week. Teams are really trying to fight for the 4th spot in the Eastern Conference.
They really are.
You got several teams making big trades now. You got the Knicks. The Knicks getting OG, the Pacers getting Siakam, and now the Heat getting Rozier. It does help them quite a bit. They were kind of really lacking a real. Terry Rozier is a little underrated as a playmaker. He's really had to step up for Hornets this season because LaMelo was out a good chunk of the season, so he's kind of. His playmaking has really improved this season. So I think he's going to be very useful for Miami in that way. But to be honest, it's an they're going to it's a good enough move to put Miami in that 4 to 6 range with Indy, with Knicks. They're just bunched in with those guys at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if people see an opening right now because the Bucks were, not what they were this year, and we'll talk about the move that they made this week. But yeah, these aren't the kind of moves where I foresee it bringing a championship to them. I think the deal overall makes a lot of sense. They've been, I always like to see what the early results are for things like this. They are 0-3 so far with him. They lost to the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Grizzlies. He hasn't really found a group yet, but I said the same thing about Siakam last week. The Pacers started off 0-3, and then they've won their last 3. So putting the click and the fit in a little more of that Pacers lineup. So I'll be interested to see how he fits in with just that lineup as a whole in Miami. It's exactly what they needed right now because they needed more of a scoring punch. And Terry Rozier is really underrated as a scorer. He's averaged over 18 points, for the last 5 straight seasons, which I don't think people realize, and 3 of the last 4 have been over 20 points. This year, he's averaging his career high with over 23 points a game. You mentioned the playmaking, which is a career high 6.6 assists for him. So he's having a fantastic year. And the Heat overall have been struggling offensively. They have the second fewest points in the entire Eastern Conference. And that's not any fault of their defense. They've been a top 5 defensive team in the East, so they can't score. It's funny, actually. Last week, you mentioned him kind of on the side, but Terry Rozier has been really terrible defensively this year, but so have the Hornets as a whole. So we'll see if maybe putting him in a system in Miami helps, because he has the athleticism to be a good defender, but he just hasn't been
mentality.
This year.
He has the mentality to be, you think of it back to his days with Boston. He was a good defender.
Yeah.
So
yeah, sometimes I think defense is infectious. When nobody else is playing defense, what, are you going to be the only guy going out there and putting effort on the defensive end? Which
I mean, kind of when you're playing next to LaMelo Ball, who doesn't play any defense either.
You're going to guard the whole perimeter by yourself. So, I mean, overall, it's a move that makes a lot of sense. I mean, for the Heat and what they need. For the Hornets, I mean, I don't think that he was a long-term play alongside LaMelo. He is 29 too, so, I don't think he's going to be a core of whenever the Hornets are competitive. He's not a part of that, so I think it makes sense for them to capitalize and get some sort of value.
Yeah.
I mentioned we'll stay in the Eastern Conference here, so you kind of indirectly called this move this week with the Bucks making a coaching change. Mm-hmm. And when we did our anti-awards last week, Adrian Griffin was your anti-coach of the year for the most disappointing head coach. And then the very next week he gets fired. So what do you, as a Bucks faithful, do you like this move? What do you think?
I wasn't expecting Adrian Griffin to get fired this early. Now, I did hear a story earlier today about something that happened earlier in the season. You remember that when before the season started, Terry Stotts was brought in as his top assistant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you remember how he basically quit before the season started?
Yep.
I read a report today that the reason he quit is because during a practice, Adrian Griffin had the players huddle and he had all the coaches huddle. And Terry Stotts tried walking over to the players huddle to tell Giannis and Dame something. And then Adrian Griffin yelled at him to get back over to the coaches huddle, and he called him out in front of everybody for some whatever. So, and then 3 days later, Terry Stotts quit. So that kind of wasn't a good tone setter for But the Bucks defense was terrible. It is a move that needed to be made. I didn't expect it to happen during the season. I thought it was a one and done deal because they were 30-13 at the time they fired him. So I mean, their record was still good, but the Bucks have championship expectations. With the acquisition of Damian Lillard. Now Doc Rivers, I think it's an interesting move. Doc Rivers hasn't really lived up to expectations as a coach recently. He's had several disappointing playoff exits in recent memory, but he sounds excited. The players, from all the reports that I'm hearing, the players are excited to play for Doc Rivers. Giannis is excited. Dame's excited. Bobby Portis is excited. They all went out and said how excited they are. Bobby Portis said he's he's looking forward to a coach that is going to challenge the players and whatnot. So I like the move. Now, part of the problem with the Bucks in the playoffs last year was their late game situations, and that's not what Doc Rivers is known for. So I'm interested to see how that goes. I like the hire. I think they need to go out and kind of get a veteran guy because this is a championship team. So I like the move, but we'll see. And people forget Rivers played at Marquette in like the 80s, I think, or 1980 or something like that. So I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a homecoming. So I'm excited, and this move will be judged by how they do in the playoffs, specifically in late game situations.
I mean, I don't think it's far-fetched to say that it's championship or bust. It's not even going to the finals. I don't think would be a successful season. And I think for Doc Rivers, this has the potential to write the entire narrative for his career.
Yeah.
Because the last two stops for him, extremely disappointing with the 76ers, had all the talent in the world. Same with the Clippers before that. And he's just never been able to get it done. I mean, he has the one championship from, what was it, 08, something like that with the Celtics.
And he made it back in 2010, but lost.
But, I mean, with the amount of talent he's coached over his career, to have only one championship is really not wonderful. So I think it's a big opportunity for him to change that narrative. I don't know if it completely changes it, but yeah, I mean, because even with Adrian Griffin, the way that they were playing, they probably could have made it to the Eastern Conference Finals and probably lost to the Celtics. So to me, the reason you bring in Doc Rivers is you're expecting to make the finals and win, and there's nothing in between. So there's a lot of pressure on this team. I think overall, you mentioned just the lack of defensive effort, and a lot of things that I read is that players just weren't, and other coaches weren't impressed with just the way that Adrian Griffin was scheming the game when he was drawing up plays defensively and offensively. And I saw one funny video where Giannis grabbed the whiteboard and was scratching out plays on the sideline. So I think there's just been this frustration where he wasn't necessarily an X's and O's guy. And I think that was frustrating to people. Doc Rivers is an X's and O's guy, and he gets the most out of his players, not in the playoffs, but yeah, we'll see. Just an interesting note to make here. Only two other teams in NBA history have made a midseason coaching change with a winning record. And that was the 2015-16 Cavaliers when they fired David Blatt. They won the championship that year. And then the 1979-80 Lakers, who also won the NBA championship. So the only two other times this has happened in NBA history, there has been a championship won by that team. So no pressure, Doc Rivers, but there's a lot riding here. So we'll see. It's the kind of move where it's hard. You can't analyze it, in my opinion, right now and say, oh, good move, bad move, because the story is still being written at this point. So let's move it over to speaking, Draymond Green, who you brought up earlier in passing, was left off the Olympic roster. And you mentioned to me before we started recording that you were reading about how disappointed he was. So what do you think? Do you think he deserved to be left off this Olympic pool of players? What's it, 41 they're at?
Yeah. Okay. So first off, the reality, and Draymond said this during his show recently, he wasn't probably going to make the team anyways.
Oh, gosh, no.
I don't. So, so that's the first thing. Draymond's big issue with it was when Grant Hill came out and said, and the quote was, "We all understand and certainly have great respect and sensitivity to this particular period in his career, and he's working through some things both on and off the court. And so we at USA Basketball wanted to support him on his journey, and we just didn't feel that playing over the summer gives him the best opportunity to do what he needs to do." That's that's a hell of a thing to say publicly.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that is what Draymond had an issue with. Draymond said, and quote, "I wish you would have just said that to me, especially if you're going to say that publicly, so it hurt me a bit." So, I mean, I think that's my big issue. That's where I kind of side with Draymond on this. If you're gonna leave him off the Olympic team, fine. Because he probably wasn't gonna make the team anyways. And I mean, Grant Hill has a point. What he's saying is correct, but I don't think that's something you needed to say publicly. Because it's kind of, Draymond Green's trying to get his life together, basically, while he's currently playing. And so I just don't think it was a great move from Grant Hill. As far as him at Draymond being left off, I think it's fine. I don't think at this stage in his career, on the court, he would help nearly as much as all the other guys. I don't have the complete list of the 41 guys that were invited, but at this point, he wasn't going to make it, so I don't have an issue with him actually being left off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of political BS statements like that. Like, it's so just like, I don't know. That's a mushy statement where, let's just be real, they didn't want the drama around USA basketball this year. Like, and really, there is an argument to be made. If anyone listening, or UK man too, you should pull up and read through the Olympic roster, because I have no idea how they're going to trim it down to 12 players. I was actually writing it down, trying to trim it down earlier. I mean, you're talking like James Harden and like even Jaylen Brown being like borderline, maybe not making it players, because it is absolutely just loaded this year.
Like, who's locks? LeBron,
Steph Curry, Durant.
Steph Curry, Durant, LeBron,
and
probably Anthony Davis.
Yeah,
probably
Embiid.
Anthony Davis. Embiid, Jokic. No, not Jokic.
Good try, though.
I was just, I forgot that he's foreign for a second. So that's 5. Like, you got 7 spots for
Jason Tatum, right? I'd say it has to be
6. So, but you gotta think you're gonna have half the team but you're gonna have 5 or 6 spots to fill from 35 players.
Yeah, I mean, and you're talking Kawhi, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving, Chet, James Harden, Tyrese Halliburton, Paul George, De'Aaron Fox. I mean, just that's the quick, not even the whole, Jalen Brunson, Jimmy Butler, Devin Booker. I mean, Scotty Barnes, Banchero, Bam. Like, I just listed 10 guys quickly. Most of those guys are not going to make the roster. So what would be fun is we should do a draft with the player pool here and then play on NBA 2K against one another. That would be that would be pretty fun. But yeah, I mean, he wasn't going to make it, but I just don't like statements like that when we all know what the real reason is. Like, let's just be honest here. And you can't say that publicly, but I don't like stuff like that. So
yeah.
Alrighty, let's go. Got a few more things on the list here. Next, I have the All-Star starters on our list. So the Eastern Conference and Western Conference All-Star starters were named this week. In the Eastern Conference, we have Giannis, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard. In the Western Conference, we have LeBron, Kevin Durant, Jokic, Luka, and Shea. What do you think of these? Do you agree with it? Think anybody got snubbed?
Man, there's a lot of, and we already know first of all, I'm glad they're going back to East versus West. So that's nice. First off, second off, the consensus biggest snub is Jalen Brunson being left off for Damian Lillard. When you look at the numbers, I can see why people would say that. I mean, Jalen Brunson's having like a career year almost. But the thing is, like, people take a look at the numbers and they don't really tell the whole story. Like, Jalen Brunson is like the main number one option on his team. So it's, are his numbers kind of inflated a bit because he's the number one guy.
Mm-hmm.
Dame, for the first time in his career, is not the number one option anymore. So, does that kind of play a factor? I mean, Dame isn't having like a fantastic season by any stretch. I mean, he's still averaging 25. He's averaging 25 a game, but a lot of his numbers aren't where they were during his time in Portland. But I mean, I guess you could say Jalen Brunson got snubbed. I don't think it's as big of a deal as everyone was making it out to be. But yeah, that's kind of the big one everybody's talking about. I mean, but I know a lot of people. I know a lot of other people are talking about Kawhi Leonard, but the situation is that front court in the West is Nikola Jokic, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant.
Yeah, who you bumping?
I don't know. Who are you taking out that? We'll talk about LeBron James in a second, but yeah. So other than that, I think they got it mostly right. I mean, you can make the Brunson argument, but I know a lot of people are saying Donovan Mitchell too could have made it. But I don't think there was that many like god awful snubs. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, not really. I was surprised Donovan Mitchell just in general wasn't getting more love. I mean, he was pretty lowly ranked on the player voting side. So I was actually just reading through each one of just where the players ranked each player and the fans and the media. The one that I thought was the biggest difference, which was interesting, Eastern Conference guards, Tyrese Maxey was actually listed as number 2 by the player voting standards. So I just thought that was interesting. He was kind of down there for the media and the fan vote especially, but the players thought Tyrese Maxey should have been in the starting lineup. But it's weird to think that, I mean, I think historically when I've looked at the all-star rosters and all-star starters, I've gone, what is going on here? And there's always been like a huge egregious snub. But in this case, like, I really can't argue with it much. Like Damian Lillard and Jalen Brunson, I mean, they were tied in the scoring system. And the tiebreaker was that Damian Lillard ranked higher with the fans, because if 2 players are tied, then the fan vote is the tiebreaker. So, I mean, that's how close this was. They were actually tied, and it came down to a tiebreaker. So it's really hard to argue with, with Damian Lillard making it. So, yeah, I think overall it'll be interesting to see the total rosters to see if we have anyone snubbed. But Donovan Mitchell, I mean, on paper has been amazing. So, like me personally, I would put Donovan Mitchell in. That would be my choice. But I mean, he was 5th, I believe, ranked. So I was just more surprised he wasn't more a part of that conversation. But let's head over next. We're gonna go to the Western Conference, talking about Chris Finch and the Timberwolves. So I'm going to just read some quotes here from Chris Finch after their loss to the Hornets, where Karl Anthony Towns had over 60 points. Chris Finch, their head coach, in case you don't know, of the Timberwolves, he said, absolute disgusting performance of defense and immature basketball. Also adding, I mean, there's a lot of times when just because you've scored 2 or 3, 4 points in a row, obviously we're going to try to feed the hot hand, look for a hot hand, but at some point, we got to get back to making the right play. We got to get back to doing the right things. So kind of calling out the team. What do you think of Chris Finch doing this for a team that's overall played really well this season?
Yeah, and if you went back to our awards, he was my pick for Coach of the Year. So, interesting thing. First of all, kind of lost in this a little bit was Carl Anthony Towns. Like Carl Anthony Towns had a career game. Like actually, like not only 62 points, but very efficient 62 points. 21 to 35 from the floor, 10 of 15 from 3, 10 of 14 from the free throw line. But when we haven't mentioned this yet, they were playing the Charlotte Hornets. And I don't know if people are aware of this, but the Charlotte Hornets kind of suck. So, like I said, it was a 128-125 loss to the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, there's no excuse you should be giving up 128 points to the Charlotte Hornets. I think to an extent they were, and I didn't watch the full game. I saw some highlights of some pretty bad defense from Minnesota, but yeah, you just can't have a performance like that, especially, and it's upsetting because you see the season that Minnesota's having when no one was expecting this. So for this, for them to do something like this, and I'm usually not like a major fan of like coaches just like calling out players. Like I don't think that's how you keep team morale and how you handle business. But in this situation, I mean, he felt this was the thing to do, and I don't necessarily blame him. I mean, they have high hopes this season now. So if they're gonna get to where they want to be, they can't be having defensive lapses for like the entire game. Almost, especially in the second, like down the stretch in the second half. I mean, in that game, you had Charlotte shot almost 57% from the field. So, I mean, you got to think entering the game, like I said, Minnesota was 30-13, and the Hornets were 10-31. So, I mean, the bottom line. Yeah, like I said, bottom line is just I don't blame him at all.
I mean, I like it. A lot of people are upset saying that it was kind of out of line, but here's the reality with teams like the Thunder and the Timberwolves who are exceeding expectation. They're trying to change the entire culture of that organization. These have been losing organizations for quite a while now. And in order to hold people accountable and to change the culture within an organization, I think it takes somebody kind of lighting a fire under players. So I personally like him. And, you could argue whether or not to do this publicly, but I like that he has that attitude. Like, hey, just because we're, tied for first right now in the Western Conference, that means nothing. Like, we haven't accomplished anything at this point. We need to play our best basketball every single night. So I think what'll be more telling is to see whether or not the players respond to that. So if the players, you catch any, sign of them lagging or not putting in as much effort, because, I mean, there's been an amazing amount of effort from that team this year. When you talk about Anthony Edwards having a top 10 defensive rating in the league after being an embarrassment of a defender throughout the first few years of his career, that's an amazing feat. So I'm not overly optimistic, if we're being honest about it. As we're recording this, they lost to the Spurs 2 nights ago. So that's not exactly the way that you want to rebound after a loss like that. But they play the Thunder on the 29th, which is the day that we're recording this. So that's a big game. I think if they want to show, if they respect Chris Finch, if they want to play hard for him, that's the kind of game you go out there and you make a statement. Just don't beat the Thunder, like crush them and prove that you're a threat in the Western Conference. So I think that'll be the most telling thing. If over the next few weeks we don't see more effort, then the players don't respect him. That's just the honest truth, is that they didn't respond to him trying to fire them up. So to be determined whether or not that's a smart move on his end.
Mm-hmm.
Next, staying in the Western Conference, we had quite the duel the other night with the Lakers and the Warriors. I actually watched every single minute of this game. I happened to just be kind of at home looking for some TV, and the game was just starting. So I couldn't obviously stop watching it once it went into double overtime. But the Lakers and Warriors had a double overtime game where the Lakers won 145 to 144. LeBron had his career high in rebounds with 20 and a triple-double, so quite the game for him. Steph Curry with 9 threes and over 40 points. So quite the duel from two legends. What do you think about this one?
Man, that's just, and this is it. Oh, for some reason, it hurts me to talk positive about LeBron James. Just because I just don't like him. But you gotta respect what you just mentioned. He's in year 20 and he's just set a career high in rebounds. I know it was a double overtime, so he played a lot of minutes and whatnot, but still, he is in year 20 and he just set a career high in rebounds. That's just dude just loves the game like a lot. So to see this battle, Steph was doing his thing. He said he had 46. He had included 15 in the overtime period. So that was really a duel. And LeBron kind of said it best. After the game, he said, "It's something I'll be able to talk about with my grandkids. When you talk about me being able to compete versus one of the greatest players to ever play the game." And this is kind of like, so you watched the whole game. I wasn't able to watch the whole game, but I watched bits and pieces, and then I saw the obviously the highlights, and I watched video of every one of Steph's points. So. But this is why I love basketball. You got two all-time greats just dueling it out. In a situation like this felt in the vibe that people felt like this was a playoff game. With the intensity and LeBron James and Steph Curry, they have that history in the finals and all that stuff. So, it's such a treat to be able to witness two of the all-time greats just go at it, especially when you got LeBron in year 20 and I believe Steph's in year 15 or something like that.
Around
somewhere around there. So it's a treat to be able to see these guys go at it.
Yeah, and it was interesting too because there was a lot of people stepping up big time. D'Angelo Russell hit a lot of clutch threes in that game and actually played really, really well, which has kind of gotten lost within the way that LeBron and Steph were playing. But the other thing that I thought was interesting, Draymond Green plus 31 on the night with his plus-minus rating. And you could tell that when he was on the floor that the Warriors were just a different team. And I know we've talked a lot about him in the early part of this season, but he's such a key part to that team. And I think this game has been I think it's going to be a big momentum shift for the Lakers. They've already kind of been playing better and better. When you look at the last 10 games now, they've had wins against the Clippers, against the Thunder, against the Mavericks, against the Warriors, and then they beat the Pacers a few days. Actually, they didn't play the Pacers. I went too far back. But anyway, they've had some high-quality wins over the last 10 games. It looks like the team's starting to click together. So I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs. I know everybody knows that, but it was a fun game to watch. It was fun.
Klay Thompson didn't step up. Jesus Christ.
Except
I mean,
he
he had 24, but like I was just looking at his number, 9 of 24, 6 of 17 from 3-point range. Like,
yeah, I mean, he started the game 1 for 9 from the field, I believe it was, and then really started to catch fire the second half. I mean, he sent them into, was it the first or second overtime? He hit one of the shots that tied the game to send them to one of the overtimes. So he did have one clutch shot, but he started. I mean, part of the reason that they were in a hole was because he was playing terribly. Yeah, gosh, it's sad watching him. We're talking about all the positives, but it is sad watching him. He looks like a shell of himself. But anyway, let's end here with the last topic that we have, which is just a little Adam Silver news. It looks like he's going to be getting an extension through the end of the decade. They didn't officially announce a date. They just said through the end of the decade. It would make him the second longest tenured commissioner in NBA history, behind David Stearns, who was the commissioner for 30 years, which, gosh, I knew it was a long time, but 30 years would be the commissioner is a long, long time. So this will put Adam Silver by the end of the decade at right around 16 years. So quite the impressive feat for him. And that'll be interesting. There's some things in the works for the NBA that he'll probably get to oversee over the next few years. So the NBA's talked about an expansion for a long time that I think is going to end up happening at some point. There's some big money when it comes to media deals in the works right now. So when you look at his tenure at the end, it's going to be impressive when you think about the play-in games being implemented and the in-season tournament and everything that he's done is going to be, he's going to have quite the resume by the end of this tenure.
yeah, and I've been saying this. I think he's the greatest. He's the best sports commissioner that I've seen in my lifetime. When you really think about it, I mean, he's, when you're the commissioner of a major league sports league, it's so hard to, because you work for the owners basically, but at the same time, it's so important as a commissioner that you hear the players and you're with the player. And Adam Silver cares about the players, I think. And that's, I mean, you don't really see many commissioners come across, as really being kind of more of a players commissioner. I mean, like you said, he oversaw, and you remember he also oversaw the recent CBA that went into effect this season. There's no threat of a labor stoppage for at least several more years. So, that's such a, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, you mentioned like the overall successes of play-in, expansions, the changes to the All-Star game. Part of the changes this season were because Adam Silver listened to the players and what they thought they needed in order to make it a more competitive game. And I hope, and he's not going to be around forever. I mean, he's 61, but I hope for at least the majority of my lifetime that he's the commissioner, because he's just good. I mean, and I'm reading here. I mean, you got to think. Look how much money he's made the NBA. I mean, so when he took over as commissioner, the average price of an NBA team was $510 million, right? The average value of an NBA team now is $4 billion.
Wow, that's crazy.
Like, that is insane. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but part of it is how good Adam Silver's been for the NBA. So, I mean, I'm just you can't say enough good things about him as commissioner.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think people appreciate it, but they'll appreciate it even more once there's another commissioner that comes in. And it's the same thing, even, when you watch LeBron and Steph. Like, we take for granted because we've gotten to watch LeBron over 20 years now, and it's become just regular to watch, greatness on a daily basis. So, it'll be people will realize what they have once he's gone someday with Adam Silver. So there's some big shoes to fill there. That's for sure.
And I didn't even mention, I mean, you look at that pandemic era of the NBA. I mean, he did a masterful job of guiding the league through that pandemic shortened season where he brought all the teams into the bubble and whatnot. I mean, say what you will about that, but he did a masterful job of still giving us basketball during that time period.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, other commissioners and other leagues need to take note on how Adam Silver is running the NBA.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's not much else you can say. I think that's a good note to end on. So anything else you want to bring up? Anything else on your mind?
No, we talked about Doc Rivers, but I don't know if we said it, but he is making his coaching debut for the Bucks tonight in Denver.
Ooh.
So I'm excited for his first game. I can't talk about throwing him into he gets thrown into a fire in his first game as a coach. He gets to go to Denver. So that should be exciting. We'll see. I mean, we had a lot of news this week. We'll see if it's more of the same or so the law of averages, kind of does it, we'll see. But I'm excited. All-Star game around the corner. I'm just excited to see what happens this week. I want to see if this week lives up to last week. We talked about a lot today.
It's a hard act to follow, so
it is.
We'll see what happens this upcoming week. We appreciate you guys listening, and we will see you next time.